Alright. What's up, everybody, and welcome back. StarCraft 2 have dropped their new hotfix patch notes here on the 17th of July, 2026. I've just spent a little while going through them, talking about my concerns, kind of teasing them out and thinking about them out loud with my Twitch chat, and realizing there are some big doo-doos in here, as well as some interesting things. Let's take a look. First of all, we've got some Protoss changes. The Colossus damage has increased from 10 plus 5 versus light to 12 plus 3 versus light, which means the total remains the same versus light units, but a significant 20% increase, at least when you've got no upgrades, against the non-light units, which is really friggin' big. I've been playing around with it. I'm not sure how to test this versus the old changes, but of course, this is most impactful against Marauders and Roaches, the most common interactions you're looking at. Obviously, it does more damage to Siege Tank, to Cyclone. It does more damage to Queens, Banelings as well. There's a lot of little changes with that. Keep in mind, like, Banelings have 35 hit points, so, you're not just going to suddenly one-shot them or anything like that. It's still going to take 2 shots. But when it comes to Roaches, people have told me if they've got equal upgrades, it goes from 9 shots to kill a Roach down to 7. Something similar here with Marauders as well. I mean, we're used to them tickling Marauders. This is no attack upgrades, but we do have Colossus range, by the way. Marauders aren't stibbing. They don't have any upgrades. They don't have any medevacs. Obviously, this is not a realistic scenario, guys, but I think you can see that there is a pretty decent amount of an increase in terms of the actual damage per second. Now, one of the interesting changes is the Colossus used to be like this, except it used to just do flat damage versus everything. And I believe it was 15 times 2 versus everything. I could be incorrect on the numbers. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. The point being, it used to be a one-size-roasts-all powerhouse. And one of the big changes they made was they basically redesigned the Colossus to have this difference versus light and armored units. That's a big change because they said, hey, the Colossus, it roasts Lings, it roasts Hydras, it roasts Marines and Widow Mines and Hellions and Hellbats, but it's not particularly good. It's a very long range unit. It can shoot and pull back, like you guys know, like the way you're actually meant to use this, right? Is you're just meant to keep moving and shooting. And you can see, it could still do that even pre-patch, but its damage was obviously very slow and very incremental. And that's gonna change. They're like, hey, like, it used to be like it would kill everything in Heart of the Swarm Wings Liberty. They made it more of a specialist unit, right? The Colossus is very expensive, big investment, but it wasn't as well rounded. And one of the big, I think problems. The reason why I wanted to show this with Marauders first is because obviously a lot of people are going to be, and we can stim this time and do a bit of micro. A lot of people think about, well, Terran just doesn't even build Marines. They just build, like, Ghosts and Marauders the later the game goes, and the Colossus doesn't do much bonus damage, and it feels crappy to go for this unit that its damage is so low and incremental. One of the weird things, though, is if you actually watch top Protoss players with Colossus, it's still a god tier unit even before this patch. And the reason for that is because it's so good at moving and just shooting and pulling back and shooting and pulling back. And you'll notice that whenever enemy units chase, so like, let me just show you a very simple example. It's not a realistic example because obviously I can't micro both sides at once. You can see if we just make a giant army here, but we don't stim it, notice how the units, as long as they're kind of just moving forwards, they're going to stay clumped. If we let them move out into a battle line, they'd spread out and they wouldn't take as much splash. But you can see as long as they're moving in a clump like this, as long as they're chasing, they're clumped and they're weak to splash damage. And this is the whole thing in PvT, is you'll see the best Protoss players and they will stutter step their Colossus and constantly force the Terran to stim, pull back, use force fields, use Guardian Shields. And you'll see when like a Max Pax or a Hero, one of these best Protoss players in the world, has the Terran behind and they don't have Vikings or something to counter the Colossus, the Colossus can just chip at them and basically move in and out and never really commit to the fight. And that's why this is a very dangerous unit. It's a unit which in the hands of the best players in the world, not my hands, because I'd say there's a lot of even high-level Protoss players who don't do this that well, and they like just headbutt and go for an A-move fight. I know I do with my Colossus, but in the hands of the Max Paxes and the Heroes, when you see it used to its peak effectiveness, it really is. If you don't have the answer to it, it's going to be really scary. Now, is that a good or a bad thing? That's going to be subjective for you. Hey, if Protoss is ahead, maybe they should just be able to finish the game. I think we're kind of used to a dynamic in this matchup where Protoss gets quite ahead in the mid-game, but really struggles to close the game out because, you get to these later fights, and there's these guys in there, these ghosts, and they just remove half your hit points, right? All your shields are just gone at the start of a fight. Vikings are absolutely insane. when it comes to dealing with Colossus. Like, we often go, oh, Colossus is so good. And it's always about, and we always talk about this as commentators, right? It's how many Vikings are there? Because 3 Colossus is amazing, but if you haven't got any efficiency, if you haven't actually been able to chip in them and kill Terran units and force good trades, and then they have 10 Vikings, and you go for a fight, the Vikings are like, hey, buddy, we also have really good range. You know, a Viking also has the same range as a Colossus, and they absolutely obliterate the Colossus. That's without any EMPs landing, right? Now, obviously, it's not as simple as that interaction there, but the point being, there is, like, very hard fall-off points for the Colossus in the current game, but when it is ahead on the tech, and when there aren't Vikings ready, it does really struggle. I think one of the things Protoss players also have been frustrated by is the Viking, you know, went from 125 to 135 hit points. They also made it so the Viking is much smoother to move and shoot. There was a change to its, I think it's called damage point? Attack point? Damage point, right? Where you can move and shoot much quicker. You don't have to wait as long. And this is like the Clem buff. I remember years ago, a couple years ago, MaxPax talking about how this was basically like a massive buff to Clem, especially because his Viking micro is so good and he doesn't feel it against the other players. But he's like, man, they buffed Clem's Viking so much. Like, what the hell? He was like, that's actually a crazy change. Where when he was adjusting to that patch where they made that change, MaxPax was like, damn, Vikings are so much better. So definitely Vikings have been better. Also, Vikings got made cheaper in a previous patch. I don't think they've gone back on that, right? So Vikings are cheaper as well. There's a lot of things here where, like, if I look at just those, I go, this seems kind of fair. Let's make the Colossus stronger. But then I go back and I think about the fact that Terran, so far in this patch, has just been so behind because Protoss starts with a chrono boost, and Terran does not get an orbital dropping mules till quite deep in the game. By the time an orbital's up and you're dropping mules, Protoss is getting close to their second, I think their second chrono's finished. I think their third chrono's, like, getting close to happening. So Protoss just has an early, like, momentum lead in TVP right now, which is, I think, skewing a lot of what's happening in the actual games. So unless that gets fixed, this could snowball to make that even worse. So up here in the notes, it says, we're making changes based on players' data and feedback. We are calibrating both Protoss and Terran to help deal with Zerg. So obviously, Zerg got their lava buffed in the last patch, but actually, I think this affects PvT more than PvZ. It does affect PvZ as well. It'll help the Colossus actually defend roach timings very effectively. You could probably just go Colossus as a default first thing to do after your Blink Stalkers or Zealots, whatever you prefer to open with, your Oracle into third base, go straight to Colossus will be much more viable with this change. But I think against Terran, where Colossus are already a mainstay of the matchup, that's going to be really big. Now, obviously, this is going to interact with this change down here, which we'll talk about in a bit, which is the craziest change. There's also an Adept change, guys. Adept's damage modifier per attack upgrade is increased from 1+1 versus light to 2+2 versus light. Now, what's so insane about this is the number sounds scary. So if we give an Adept +3, look at this. The Adept now has 34 damage versus light, which just sounds insane. It just sounds crazy. So, yeah, we could basically, let's get some Marines here with combat shields, and you're going to see it's going to do a crazy amount of damage. These Marines don't have any armor, obviously not realistic. Let's give them +3 armor to make the interaction look more. If you've got +3 attack, let's imagine Terran has +3 armor, even though Terran's usually a bit behind in upgrades in this matchup. You're still going to get 2-shot by these Adepts. Now, that seems scary. 34 seems like a crazy number, right? Let's just put this in context quickly. Keep in mind, oh, sorry, let's also give Zerg +3 carapace to make this a bit more realistic. We don't care about the Hydra damage, obviously. We just want to show the Adept damage difference, and it's going to 3-shot the Hydras, right? Now, obviously, this Adept does not have glaives. A more realistic scenario, if we're at +3, is we'd have glaives as well, and it's going to attack 45% faster. But yeah, obviously the Adept is cheaper than a single Hydra. Obviously, it's going to trade really well if it's just fighting Hydras or Zerglings or whatever like that. But keep in mind, 34 damage, it's still not enough to one-shot Zerglings. It'll make them quite good against Hellbats, funnily enough. Interaction I haven't really thought about, but like... Guys, now you go Adepts to help clear the Hellbats, you know? Because it's like, it's a pretty crazy amount of damage. They actually kill Hellbats really quickly. I think partially what might actually be more impactful is actually just the boat, because it gets +2 versus regular, rather than doing 13 damage here versus regular non-light units, it does 16. That's a pretty significant increase as well. So overall, the Adept just becomes better as a core unit late game. Is it going to compete with the Zealot? I still don't think it does. Reason being, the Adept costs 25 gas, and If you're playing against a Terran, problem. So if we put a Zealot, look at the Zealot, guys. The Zealot has 50 shields, 100 hit points, 70. EMP hits both of them, you lose your shields. One of these has 100 hit points, one only has 70. That alone is just hard to change. The difference of, you've also got to realize that you look at the Zealot and you think this guy does 22 damage flat, which is way more than this versus Marauders and non-light units, even though it's less there. But look at the weapon speed. Even with Resonating Glaives, 1.11 attack speed. So just over a second for the Adept to throw an attack. The Zealot is almost 0.3 of a second faster. That's a big increase. Let's say about 25% faster attacking. And you've got that extra 30 hit points, right?
Yes, exactly.
And even if you're against Zerg, it's still a total of 10 extra hit points and shields combined. So the Zealot saves you 25, does more well-rounded damage, even though it's a little less versus light. The advantage of the Adept is it's a range unit, but it's only 4 range, guys. Remember, it's only 4 range, okay? So it's still going to run pretty close to the enemy. It's still going to get wrecked by Banelings and a lot of splash damage. It's going to be really weak to like Disruptors, Archons, Colossus in PvP. Zerg, Banelings, Lurkers are going to absolutely ruin it. Terran EMP is gonna ruin it as well. I think realistically, the problem here lies in the fact that your main use for gateway units, the later you go in the game, when you've got things like +3, is for counterattacks. It's for run-bys. It's warping in Zealots in their main, and you want them to be able to kill buildings, which the Zealot's going to do a much better job of than the Adept. You want them to be able to kill workers, which sure, the Adept does well, but the Adept's going to struggle to kill the Marauders popping out, the Queens popping out that are taking aggro. The Zealot's just a cheaper, more well-rounded unit in those situations, and it's also better at tanking. Now, arguably, the Zealot will charge in front and die to Banelings more, but if you're at high enough level to have good micro, you can pull those Zealots back, wait for the Banelings to clear, and then come in with the Zealots, right? The Zealot is, in general, at higher levels, just going to be a better unit, well-rounded, no matter what. So I still think the Zealot beats out the Adept in most scenarios, but if you're a hipster nerd who just loves the Adept, I think Hupsaya will be really happy. His using Adepts as a core unit style, that's already a bit of a gimmick style, is going to be a little bit better. I still don't think it's better than using Zealots as your core gateway unit. I think 9 times out of 10, I still want the Zealot, but it's kind of cool. I don't know if there's any breakpoints with like an early +1 timing. Like if you get +1, this doesn't change anything. You might be like, oh, but look, now it 2-shots Marines and SCVs. It already 2-shot Marines and SCVs before this change, which was like such a big thing. So I don't, is there a 50 hit point unit that it now kills in 2 shots? I can't think of a 50 hit point light unit off the top of my head. So I don't know. I don't really see there being like, oh, this is an amazing +1 timing or something like that. So to me, this feels like a change which is incredibly inoffensive to me, because you're making an early game unit that isn't good in the late game a little bit less bad in the late game. I still don't think it's fantastic, but it's fun. Good point from the chat as well, guys, is, yeah, the Zealot, because it's got 2 attacks, is going to have more damage reduction from armor. So if your opponent's got +3 armor, obviously, like, you know, it's going to be 2 times 11. It's actually 2 times 8, 16, but it's still generally going to be a bit more reliable and cheaper and more damage. All right, guys. Now here's a really fun one. This is what I call a David Kim change. Gateway unit train time reduction bonus from researching Warp Gate increased from 40% to 50%. Gateway Warp Gate transformation duration is now always 4 seconds, reduced from 7 and 5 seconds respectively. And the Disruptor Phantom weapon range decreased from 11.35 to 7. This last one is literally just making sure the Disruptors don't stay so far back from the battle. Sure, that's fine. I don't really care about this at all, guys. I don't think it matters too much. I guess just they were stopping very far back from the battle. Now they're going to come to kind of stay closer to your army, which is fair. This is an even bigger increase to the gateway production speed. I was talking about this earlier with a few GM Protoss players in chat as well, guys. This is a David Kim change. What does that mean? It's basically the guys at Blizzard are sick of waiting for players to figure out how powerful the new gateway change is. Skillis was the only player at Home Story Cup who constantly used it. Showtime used it in one game I saw. Maybe I missed other players using it, but most players are just basically making warp gates stick into their comfort zone. The gateway boost is such a huge tempo boost. It is the thing is, don't get me wrong, there's a weird thing. I was talking about this earlier. Basically, Stalkers are still 175 resources, right? 125 minerals plus 50 gas. That's still the same cost. So if you want to build 10 Stalkers, it's still going to cost you that 1750 resources. The difference is there is a tempo boost because you can now build those out of 3 gateways rather than 8. And when you're defensive, this is a massive boost. If you are constantly building out of 3 gateways, your stalkers are going to build in like 14 seconds now. Each gateway can build like 4 stalkers a minute. So if you have 3 gateways, guys, producing stalkers, you can make 12 stalkers in a minute. Or 12 zealots in a minute. Do you know how crazy this production is? In PvT, defending a 2-base push, a tank push, you can take a friggin' 4th base off like 3-4 gateways. It's actually insane. If you chrono the gateways, your units, you can pop like 2 stalkers per chrono boost. It's actual insanity. The amount of production you get. Now, where does it, how much money does this save you? So the difference between 3 gateways, you spend 150 on each, 450 resources for your production, whereas previously you'd go 8 times 150, you'd spend 1,200. That's a difference of 5 gateways. So what is 5 times 150? You are saving 750 minerals. In the long game, that's not a lot. 750 minerals when you're 25 minutes in doesn't matter, but if that's it 4 or 5 minutes, when your 3rd bases come up, you don't have a lot of money, you'd like to squeeze a forge in, you'd like to squeeze in extra gas, saving 750 minerals is absolutely monumental. So I really believe something which I've talked about from day 1 of the changes. Obviously, when you're just defending, like, you still want to swap to warp gates when you get aggressive. They're not that crazy expensive once you have 3 bases saturated, but when you're on 2 bases, when you're getting your 3rd base up and mining, but it's not fully established yet, you want to be in gateway form, and you want to just pump units to defend things. The number of people I've seen on this patch dying to a Roach Queen drop, Roach attack plus Queen's drop, 2-base tank push, because they're in the middle of trying to transform 6, 7, 8 gateways to warp gates, and they haven't had a chance to warp in yet. And then I've seen Skillus with 3 gateways have like a big army of zealots and stalkers out instead. It's night and day. And that was on 40% production. The fact that they are making it even stronger at 50% is literally the balance guys trying to slap the Pro Protoss players at Home Story Cup who refuse to make gateways and go, guys, you got to use this. Later on, swap to warp gates. But if you're in a defensive stance, it is criminal to not be producing out of regular gateways. It is actually criminal. It is really, really a huge mistake right now. And they're making that obvious. I think this is such an insane thing where it's bizarre because this creates a weird thing. Guys, for those who don't know, if you build a barrack, same cost as a gateway, 150 minerals, you can spend 50 minerals to build 1 marine. How long does a marine take? 18 seconds. It takes 18 seconds to build a marine. Or, with Chrono, in half that time, I think it's actually, isn't it 7 seconds? I think it's like 7 seconds to build a stalker. It's less than half that. I think it's like 7 or 8 seconds to build a stalker with Chrono. But anyway, let's just go without Chrono. It's 14 seconds. So from 18 for a marine, it's 14 seconds to build a stalker. Even though the stalker's almost, it's 3.5 times the cost. It's like, there's this weird thing where you get this tempo boost. The longer it goes, the more you're like, why am I paying so much for these shitty stalkers and zealots? Like, they're not, the zealots are a bit better value, but the stalkers especially are still obviously 175 resources for not the craziest stats. You still need to use blink and micro really well to make stalkers valuable. The point being, there is a huge tempo boost here, and as long as you're taking a 3rd and probing it and not hitting a timing attack, this is just basically saying, have 3 gateways in gateway form, mass units, you're going to save so much money, and there's like no way to kill a Protoss player who uses this. Protoss is going to be unkillable. Protoss is also going to be incredibly defensive. The downside potentially of these changes is obviously, as cool as they are, actually killing a Protoss player front on is going to be really, really difficult. How would you punish this? I guess you try to take advantage of the fact that they can't warp in, so drops might be more powerful. Multi-prong might be more powerful. If catching them out of position might be more powerful. As a result of that, though, we might see Protoss players be even more turtley and just like defensive until they swap over to gateways and the gateways to warp gates, which would not be super exciting in the meta. So as much as I'm kind of shouting at players like, guys, use mass gateway, it's really friggin' good. I also am worried that it will be like Protoss players just defend until they're on 4 base, because that's so powerful that it will almost just like outclass the warp gate timings. That being said, I think the warp-in attacks with the fast warping in pylons have been pretty powerful so far. So I have hope that this balances out and players actually play a rather diverse style. All right, guys, on to the big changes. Now, here we have a really cool change. Command center cost reduced from 400 to 300. One of the big things which I've been hearing from both casual and professional players for many years is that the command center is a bit too weak. Orbital command centers just don't really hold their own compared to Nexus or hatcheries in the end game especially. And a lot of people were just hoping to see more 3, 4, and 5 command center openings to add more strategic diversity in the current patch. We haven't seen enough of that, so Blizzard's clearly said, guys, you're not building enough command centers. We need more turtle late game and 50 to 60 orbitals. So we're going to make command center 100 minerals cheaper, which will be really fun and dynamic for the gameplay. I'm trolling! I don't like this change, guys. I really don't. So, okay, let me explain. Basically, Zerg got a lava buff, right? And Zerg's a bit out of control because of that against Terran. In ZVT, Zerg is dominating Terran in pro play. At level, average Joe, don't feel bad if you're losing as a Zerg, by the way, because the early game is still quite tight. You're meant to like start pulling away in the mid game and then kind of run away with the game if you're playing very, very well, which most of us don't. I lose many games. I saw Sarah lose a bunch of ZVTs yesterday on his stream. Like, there's don't worry. Like, you could still lose, but balance is very fine-tuned in StarCraft. So keep in mind, Zerg was beating them because that Protoss starts with a chrono boost. Terran doesn't get orbital, dropping mules for quite a few minutes. So Protoss also was just kind of pulling ahead and having too much of a tempo lead on Terran from the early game. That was making it too easy to defend. Widowmine drops, Terran harassment, Terran attacks, take a third, take a fourth, and just like we already saw in the previous patch, Protoss would sometimes run away in the mid game. We were seeing an accelerated version of that in this patch so far. So obviously they're saying, look, Terran's behind in both matchups. Let's just make the command center cheaper. I do not like this change. I believe you should change the mule instead. Or just remove the lava change for Zerg. Might be the thing to do. I'm not sure if you remove the lava change. Personally, I think probably the most elegant change right now would be remove the lava change, buff all 3 of the macro mechanics, right? Buff mule back to its Heart of the Swarm value, 30 minerals per trip rather than 25, 270 total over the lifetime, up from 225. Go from 3 lava to 4 lava for queens. That could help out, and Protoss Chrono Boost could also be made a bit better as well. But don't start with the energy on Chrono. You know, you don't need Protoss. It's just kind of awkward to balance. You can go for that ultra asymmetry. Protoss starts with their macro mechanics straight away, and they get a bit of like a lead off that, but then it's not as good in the long run or something. Like, you can have that, but it's very hard to balance. I think if you go back to what's tried, tested, and true, it's just a bit easier, and I think sometimes ease is the best medicine. So, like, my big suggestion here is, like, probably scrap the lava boost to Zerg and just up the macro mechanics for all 3 factions to the Heart of the Swarm value. Or at least if we're just going to do one, just do it for the mule here, since Zerg has already got this passive lava buff, which kind of does the same thing. You know what I mean? I guess what I like about buffing the macro mechanics in general for Terran and Zerg is it incentivizes you to get a barracks and an orbital up earlier for Terran, as a Zerg incentivizes you to get a spawning pool and a queen, which naturally these things fit with more aggressive builds, right? Going for a barracks before command center, that's more aggressive potentially. For Zerg, going spawning pool, potentially you could do an early roach timing, a bunch of Zerglings, squeeze a queen in at the same time to buff that up. The problem, and I talked about this in a previous video as well, we were talking about this in my what needs to change video, which we can kind of see here, we were talking about this just before, was that Protoss Chrono Boost is just tied to expanding. So it's like, for Protoss, if your macro mechanic gets stronger, you get rewarded just for building more bases. Whereas for Terran and Zerg, you get rewarded for, with Terran, it's upgrading the base. And for Zerg, it's getting the queen out at the start, and then after that, it's having an extra base to have the queen attached to. But in the early game specifically, it kind of rewards Terran and Zerg being a little more aggressive. Protoss, it doesn't. I think that's probably okay in terms of asymmetry, but it is what it is. The problem with this change, guys, is why would you not just go 3 command center every game? So you can give Terran a general boost by making the mule mine more resources, or something else I was considering is supply depots. So for those who don't know, guys, pylons and overlords take 18 seconds to build. Supply depots take 21 seconds. And remember, Terran SCV has to sit there mining it the whole time. If we're just going with crazy changes to the core way things have always been, you could remove that 3 seconds, make it 18 seconds to build depots. It means throughout the whole game, Terran just has to spend a bit less time with their SCVs idle building depots. The downside of that is it means your barracks can be built 3 seconds earlier. But since we're already apparently like nerfing how long Reapers take to build and stuff, I don't know, maybe that's something you do. I still feel it's more convoluted than it needs to be. The reason I like putting that mule up from 225 to 270 minerals over its lifetime, 25 per trip up to 30 per trip. The reason I like this is specifically because it doesn't touch anything else. And I think that's much more elegant than this, because that is going to give you a boost if you play 3 Command Center, right? My change. It's going to give you a boost if you play a 2-Rax Reaper opening. It's a boost across the board, okay? This, on the other hand, is going to be like, bro, you know you get 13 supply for free if you build a Command Center. So you can now go, as Zombie Grub was saying in chat earlier, a few people, they were like, can you go 3 Command Center before building a second depot with this? I'm like, well, that's what I'm going to be trying as soon as I'm done reviewing these notes. I'm going on ladder. I'm going to go build friggin' 3 Command Centers as quickly as possible. Hell, I'll build a 4th Command Center. And obviously the orbital does not cost anymore. So in late game, it means it's cheaper to get to mass orbital, which is something people already hate. But more importantly, I just think the early game build variety is going to get squished for Terran for this. Like, you're going to be so 3 Command Center focused. And it's a shame, because like, it's just like, you have way more incentive to get the expansion up rather than going for, you know, the other builds. It skews in the direction of one build way too much. And if Terran felt like they could just never expand, and if the whole meta was every Terran was like 1 base all-inning every game because they felt that was the only way to play, a change like this makes a bit more sense in theory. But I don't think that was the case, not in the games I watched at home, Story Cup, I played myself. So this change comes from far out of left field, and I dislike it because of those reasons. I rarely go out on a hard limb and say this is a shit change. I think this is a shit change. I think it's a poopy butthole change. I think it's a guy who's so confident. He thought he did a ghost shit, or a no wiper as I like to call it. So he didn't even go for the test wipe to confirm, stood up, and now he's left a bloody brown trail on his couch. I don't like this one. I don't like this change. It seems crap. That was a gross analogy, but yeah. They have upped the cost, so at least planetaries still cost the same amount, but they probably yeah. It obviously, if you do that for orbital, it kind of removes the whole point of doing this change. It's just weird. It's weird. Ghost supply is reduced from 3 to 2. Now, I had a big chat about this. A lot of people hate this change because of this change. They're already envisioning late game Terrans turtling, having a bit of an orgy in the late game. Look, I've got mass ghosts. I don't mind this change in isolation. I agree that, though, because it's paired with this change, I think we all envision crappy things happening. Let's just very quickly talk about the ghost to understand the context. So I've not seen a lot of late game. I think one of the nice advantages of this patch so far has been the fact that we haven't seen a lot of super turtley late game. One of the rare games we saw is Cyril versus Clem Home Story Cup Finals, where we actually saw the 2 best players in the world playing late game. We saw the Ghost get absolutely slaughtered by Zerg late game, which is the opposite of the prediction most people had going into these changes. Keep in mind, to tell you what changed in Ghosts before in this patch, they made the Ghost up from 2 to 3 supply, so it cost more supply. Its snipe went from 50 to 75 energy, 2 big nerfs, right? But some really big buffs as well. Its attack range went to 7. It got 20 flat damage rather than 10 plus 10 versus light, which they later toned down to now 15 flat damage, which against Zerg doesn't really change any interactions. It changes, it's overall a buff, because at late game when you're playing Ghosts, you're going to have +3 attack. They're still going to 2-shot Zerglings no matter what. Doesn't change anything, right? So we don't really need to think about their attack. It's a small thing. It matters more for like ghost rushes and things like that. It does matter a bit more in TVP, where the ghost is a bit better for shooting stalkers and Colossus and Immortals, but it's kind of beside the point. Okay, it's got 1 more range, does a bit more damage against non-light units, a bit less versus light units. It's not like, it's a bit weaker at shooting Zealots down against Protoss as well. That's a complicated change. The real change for this matchup, which is I think the most important matchup for the Ghost in this scenario, I know TVP matters as well, but right now this seems to be the focus in my opinion, especially since the patch notes said this is meant to try and help Terran, and Protoss against Zerg. The Ghost snipe cannot be interrupted. It used to be if you took any damage while aiming the snipe, the Ghost snipe would get cancelled. So if you could damage that Ghost, bam, Snipus Interruptus. That no longer happens. They removed that. All you can do is get out of vision or get far enough away that the snipe range breaks. So now they removed the counterplay to the snipe, which I actually think is kind of okay, but you have way less snipes. It used to be you'd have 4 snipes at max energy. Now you only have 2 because it costs 75 energy, up from 50, which is crazy. And the Ghost of a plus 50% supply, but they don't get interrupted. So you don't have the same traditional counterplay, but there's way less snipes available. Very hard to calculate what's better or worse there. A lot of Zerg said Brood Lords, Ultras, you can't interrupt snipe, you're just going to get wrecked, Ghosts are going to beat everything. Not factoring in that Ghosts cost way more supply now, and they have less snipes available. It's the energy is so much more valuable on those Ghosts. Also, they do 170 damage from 150. So let me bring that calculator back up. So they used to do 130 plus 40 versus Psionic, so they could still one-shot Vipers and Spellcasters. So against everything else, though, it was 130. So thinking of like a Broodlord is 225 hit points, it was getting two-shot no matter what. No difference. But when it's an Ultralisk, 500 divided by 130, it would take 4 snipes. Whereas now, if you have 500 divided by, it's up to 170 damage, it's down to 3. So you do take 1 less snipe to kill Ultras, so it is better tangibly there. And it's a little bit closer to like one-shotting Roaches and Queens and the like. So there's a bunch of changes. I think what's really interesting, though, is as much as I think the snipe and the Ghosts are a bit more valuable, it's harder to have as many. They are much better in some scenarios where you used to be able to break the snipe and now you can't. On the other hand, we saw a game here where I think a lot of people's conclusion was the Ghost is absolute garbage because it was one-sided here. Now, keep in mind, the reason it was one-sided is because Clem played mass siege tank and he never unsieged them. Clem looked a little bit tilted or a little bit unpracticed with this stuff. For those who don't know, Clem doesn't normally play siege tanks. Him playing siege tanks was him playing a style he hates to play, and he killed his own Ghosts repeatedly. Every time those Broodlords would show the Broodlings in, the tanks would all turn and kill their own Ghosts. So many Ghosts were dying. 32 Ghosts for 13 Broodlords at this point. Yes, some Ultras died as well, but that was mostly earlier in the game. He was killing his own army consistently. So this was a very bad example. I'm not saying, oh, the Ghost is actually Imba. I am saying Clem did not play well this game, and this is a bad one-off example to base a super, super comprehensive opinion around. I have not seen a lot of games on the patch. I do think, in isolation, making the Ghost from 3 to 2 supply is not that big of a deal. I think the command center change absolutely sucks, which is why people will justifiably be getting angry, say, oh, they're just going to turtle every game, play mass command center. But yeah, no, I mean, just to give you guys an idea, you're meant to have Hellbats in the mix killing the Broodlings. They one-shot the Broodlings, and Liberators with range to stop the Infestors getting in and fungling you. Because if they fungal you and then Banelings connect with the Ghosts, obviously you get wiped. So you want to have some Vikings overhead, which he does have. Doesn't really have many ship weapons upgrades, but it's fine. Having a Thor or two can be nice as well. But even when he had a Thor or two, the tanks just blasted it with friendly fire. So you want to have Ghost, Hellbat, Lib is usually a better army in this late game stage. The Hellbats help defend the Broodlings. The Ghost can obviously snipe. And the Liberators can zone the Infestors and ground units from coming in without getting massively punished, if that makes sense. Sure, there's more details to it to play absolutely perfect, but basically, Clem, he went to about 30 Ghosts, which was 90 supply of Ghosts, which I also think was way too many. I think above about 15, at most 20 Ghosts is already enough. Going 30 Ghosts and 20 Siege Tanks was crazy, and I think he did a lot of friendly fire in this game. So I'd love to see more games after that 2 supply change and see how competitive it looks. I think the one good thing about the patch and the new maps and everything has been we're just not seeing a lot of these Turtle 8 games to begin with. So I'm actually much more worried about the kind of early game build variety than I am the end game. I think the Ghost change I really don't care too much about, guys. I think I care much, much, much more about that command center change and early game TVZ build orders and TVP as well becoming quite repetitive. All right, guys, there was also a really big bug fix. They did fix the load nearby transport ability reverted. They've said, we'll look at reintroducing this at a later date. So obviously they're trying to fix that bug. They haven't found a stable fix just yet for loading units into the medevac. So it looks like they've removed that for now, which makes perfect sense. And there's just a bunch of other, changes to try and fix things. I think warp gates and gateways now being considered distinct units when selecting them. So you can kind of select your warp gates and gateways separately, and giving selection subgroup priority to warp gates over gateways is very necessary, because for those of us who hotkey all of our gateways, but maybe we haven't transformed them all to warp gates yet, it used to always select the gateways. So you'd go to warp in and you'd accidentally just queue a bunch of stalkers in your gateways, even though you were trying to warp in. You'd be like, and then you'd have to tab, you'd have to cancel them and tab and then warp in. It was really annoying. So this is a really much needed change. Okay, guys, so to summarize, where are we at? Well, I think Colossus might be too powerful in PvT. Curious to see it in PvZ. We'll see how we go. I'm not sure if Protoss needs that much help against Zerg. I don't know. PvZ is such a weird matchup. Mothership seems so strong. Protoss players were telling me, like pro players were saying, oh, Mothership's still kind of busted even after getting nerfed in the previous round of hotfix. Other people saying, yeah, Protoss does fine because of Chrono at the start. Others saying no, Zerg runs away with the game because of the lava buff. I'm not sure where to stand on the PvZ. Does Protoss need huge changes there, or in what regard? I don't know. I do think this is a good change, probably to just get people using the gateways more and then tone it down in a few weeks' time once the Protoss players have actually all realized how powerful that gateway production is. I think this change is terrible, and I get there's balance issues there. If you're struggling with the lava, you can go back and remove the lava boost for Zerg and just buff the macro mechanics across the board, go back to their Heart of the Swarm value, or just do it to the mule if you want to keep playing this one race at a time game. But I don't like the command center change. It feels a bit ham-fisted to me. We'll see how it plays out. StarCraft's still going to be StarCraft. I'm sure we'll find interesting ways to play, but I'm worried about this one restricting build diversity, similar to the way the previous Reaper and Adept build increases also could do the same thing in terms of anything that reduces like early game pressure and that sort of stuff. I'm just not that big of a fan of. Anyways, I'm gonna hop on the ladder and play some games. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Like I said, just wanted to log in, go through these, show you some of the in-game scenarios with them. I still can't get over that 34 damage for an Adept. Just seems insane, but realistically, what am I doing with +3 Glaive Adepts in the late game? I mean, maybe I'll try and do some Adept Disruptor late games or something. I don't know, man, but it just seems insane for an Adept to do 34 supply a shot, but I just don't see it being that crazy powerful. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Let me know what your thoughts are. We'll catch you next time. Goodbye and good night.